number, and I need 9 months, and I'll bring back the process and we'll institute it here. And the guy looked at me. I thought he was going to throw me out of his office. You know, he didn't say anything for a minute, and he said, "Okay, let's do it." You know, I was just stunned. So I walked out and called Otto Scharmer, who was at MIT, who was a colleague of Peter Senge's. I said, "Otto, we have this new assignment. I want you to drop everything and come with me on this journey. We're going to figure out how to do this." He said, "What?" And I said, "We're going to figure out the source of the entrepreneurial impulse. We're going to figure out where that comes from and how to replicate it." And I said, "You know, entrepreneurs, the scientists, the people that found businesses, the medical doctors, they all have this capacity to sense what it is that's needed in the world and then create something brand new, manifest something brand new in the world to go there." And I said, "That's what I need to figure out. What is the process that they go through so we can replicate that?" And he said, "I'm on, let's go." And we went on this 9-month sort of odyssey together, which was sort of the extension of my, quest for the Holy Grail, I guess you might say, the one I was after since I was 18. And we went on this quest together. I told Otto in a speech, it sort of spontaneously came to me after we had finished this whole thing, and I was giving a little talk with Otto in Cambridge one night, and it just occurred to me, and I just said this sort of spontaneously. I said, "That's the happiest year I've ever spent in my life, was being on this quest and making these new discoveries every week, talking to 150 of the most remarkable people in the world and sitting there at their knees learning, and putting this puzzle together, which resulted in this U process." Now, one of the guys that we met, I'm going to kind of fast forward here a little bit. One of the guys we met was Brian Arthur, who is one of the co-founders of the Santa Fe Institute with 6 Nobel laureates. And don't have time for the whole story, but it's a great story. If you ask me in the Q&A session, I'll tell you. But how I ended up in this room with Brian and Otto, asking Brian to explain the essence of a little sidebar article that I saw in a magazine that said, sort of at the headlines, when you're needing to make the most profound analysis of something in your life, answer the most difficult problems that you've ever faced, the most complex problems you've ever faced, what you need to do is to go to that place of deeper knowing and access it. And I said, "Dr. Arthur, when I saw that, I knew that this was the other half of the puzzle, and I'm here to talk to you about it." And he said, "Oh my God," he said, "I thought you were here to talk about the theory of increasing returns," which was his big economic theory. I said, "No, it's about this." So he said, "Oh, well, okay." But I had gotten in his front door because he had demanded that I pay him $10,000 for this 2 hours, which I didn't have the authority to do, but I felt it was so important, I went in there anyway. So he said, "Oh, well," he said, "I didn't know that's what you want." He said, "If that's what I knew, I would have been a lot more accessible." And I said, "Well, will you give the $10,000 back?" He said, "No." So anyway, we proceeded with this conversation, which was it was another David Bohm moment for me. And what he explained to me that day, what he explained to me and Otto that day, is that there are at least 4 ways of responding to change in the world and to resolving big issues. He said the first thing that happens most of the time is that we have a challenge, and we, let's see, I got to go back here. We have a challenge, and we simply react to it as sort of a knee-jerk reaction. But he said, if we take the next step, we will actually restructure something in a system or in an organization. And so he said, that's the first thing that we'll do if we're going to do something other than just simply react to it. And that's known in organizational sort of parlance, just restructuring. And you see this all over the place. That's pretty much the distance that large systems go to at this point when they need to make a change. But he said the next thing that some systems do, and he pointed to me, he said that's what you did in Shell, was to change people's thinking about things and start addressing their mental models. And that can create major change in that system. But he said, what I'm going to talk to you about is something that creates the deepest kind of change that is available to human beings, in my judgment, individually and collectively. And it's this domain of the source of commitment and inspiration and will. And he didn't use this word, but Otto and I later referred to that as presencing. Now, he proceeded to tell us of 3 specific capacities that human beings have, their core capacities, and that if they did this individually and collectively, they would be able to tap into the source of this deeper knowing. And he said this to me that day, and he said this to me many times thereafter. He said, what I'm getting ready to describe to you is what has been the process for every significant innovation in the world. He just finished writing a book on how completely new technologies have been developed. And he has referred to this process called the U process that he helped Otto and me discover that day, or uncover that day. He said, without exception, this is the process that these innovators went through. So what he described to us, I'm not going to go through all of this, because Otto and I, in the other 150 sort of dialogues that we had, developed all the rest of this. But he said there are 3 essential elements to this process. One is observe, observe, observe. And that is immerse yourself in the current situation, whatever challenge it is you're facing. And do whatever is necessary to learn as much about the particular system and the issue that you have at hand. And he said one of the essential elements of that is to suspend your old way of thinking about things, which is the hardest thing that individuals can do, is to begin to shift their own mental model, lay it aside, and begin seeing with fresh eyes, with high wonder. And so he said that's the first big element of it. And that means the death of your old mental models and letting go of the past. Hugely important and very hard to do. And then he said that the next element, which is the deepest part of this, is finding a way to access the source of deeper insights. And he said that would be the second big element here. And I'll come back to that later. And he said the third one is to begin to operate after you've accessed that deeper knowing. You begin operating in a way that is not with your head only, but is operating with your hands and your heart, putting into practical, hard models what it is you've discovered in this earlier phase. And you do this in a way that is sort of like rapid cycle prototyping. You operate with your hands and your heart instead of so much of your head, putting something down, and you know you've made a mistake, and a mistake is good, and you build on that. And you do this rapid, sort of failing fast, often, time and time and time again. He said this is the way artists operate, scientists, all of them operate. And he said if you can learn to do that and help guide people, this is the most powerful sort of way to put something like this, manifest it into reality. Now, when Otto and I left there, I sat there in the parking lot with Otto, and I looked at him and I said, Otto, I think we've come to the place where this puzzle is being answered. And we were just totally excited. And he pulled out a piece of paper. He said, you know what, we could map what Dr. Arthur said on a U, which is basically what you just saw there. And he said, why don't we take this as our base case and begin building on it? And we actually did that and formed what's known as the U process with all those other elements on it. Now, I'm going to fast forward about 2 years from that, because we took this work, took it back to the Alliance, these two energy companies, put this process in place, and had really huge success with it. And both in terms of creating new growth platforms for this company, but more importantly, it was a leadership development program for these people to see how they could begin operating in a different way individually, and how they could get others who they're working with to operate in this different way. About a year after that, Otto and I realized that we had developed something with Brian and with all these other 150 people, and had uncovered a process that could be used not only in organizational work like we did for these two big companies, but that it could be used to resolve huge, pressing social issues as well in the world. Now, again, if we had time during the dialogue, we can talk about it, but there was a series of events that took place in early 2001 for me. One in India, one in London, England, and one in Mexico, that were sort of epiphanies like that which occurred in Watergate for me, or at the conclusion of Watergate, which sent me off on a whole nother journey like the American Leadership Forum, but I founded, with others, co-founded the Global Leadership Initiative, which had as its principal goal to take 10 of the world's most pressing issues, the sort of issues that John was talking about at the beginning, and apply this U process to those big global issues, ultimately having success in resolving those, so that you could have people step back and say, this is a living example of how people can operate, not through authoritarian means or by doing more of the same, but resolving things in a way that is deeply in line with Dr. Arthur's precepts of going to that deeper place of knowing. And so we decided to form the Global Leadership Initiative, and we began after it was formed, and we had a big meeting of people from 20 or 30 countries in Stowe, Vermont. we began doing the first two of these